The sun rises over Whiting, Indiana at 6:12 a.m. on August 27, 1955. Inside the Standard Oil refinery, a brand-new hydroformer tower stands 260 feet tall against the dawn sky, its steel walls containing 30,000 gallons of naphtha under crushing pressure and searing heat. The vessel weighs hundreds of tons, designed to withstand forces that would tear ordinary structures apart. It is state-of-the-art. It is considered safe. It is about to become a bomb. Without warning, the tower explodes. The blast tears through the vessel like a fist punching through paper, hurling 30-foot sections of 2-inch steel plate across the refinery grounds and into residential neighborhoods a quarter-mile away. The sound travels 30 miles. In Chicago, 16 miles to the west, people stop on sidewalks and look toward Indiana. They see a mushroom cloud rising 8,000 feet into the morning sky, blotting out the sun, turning day into night. In homes surrounding the refinery, families are thrown from their beds. Windows shatter inward. Plaster rains from ceilings. A 10-foot section of steel pipe becomes a missile, tearing through the roof of a house on White Oak Avenue and killing 3-year-old Ricky Pluniak as he sleeps. His brother Dennis lies trapped under his overturned bed, covered in broken glass. Their father Harvey Hunter, a crane operator at Inland Steel, finds his son and carries him through a home that no longer has walls. Outside, the sky glows red. A 180-ton chunk of the hydroformer, as large as a 5-bedroom house, crashes through a grocery store 2 blocks from the refinery. The owner had left minutes before. The force of the explosion is so great that people 6 miles away report being knocked from their beds. Within seconds, burning debris rains down on storage tanks filled with gasoline, kerosene, diesel, and crude oil. The tanks rupture. 60 million barrels of petroleum products ignite. The fire begins its march across 45 acres of the refinery. 2 people are dead. 40 more lie injured. The inferno is just beginning. But to understand how this catastrophe unfolds, one must understand what Standard Oil built in Whiting, and why it was built where families would one day sleep within range of its destruction. In 1889, John D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil Trust selected a stretch of sand dunes on the southern shore of Lake Michigan for a new refinery. The location was strategic. Rail lines connected the site to oil fields in Lima, Ohio. The lake provided water for cooling and processing. The land was cheap, largely uninhabited, purchased from farmers who had no use for sandy soil. Rockefeller's engineers built the refinery to process sour crude, high-sulfur oil that other refineries rejected. They developed techniques to remove the sulfur, to extract more gasoline from each barrel, to push yields higher and costs lower. This was the Rockefeller method, technical mastery in service of monopoly. By the 1910s, with the rise of the automobile, the Whiting refinery became one of the largest oil processing centers on Earth. It sprawled across 1,600 acres, hundreds of storage tanks, miles of pipeline, distillation towers reaching toward the sky like industrial cathedrals. The refinery processed crude oil through heat, pressure, and catalytic reactions, volatile processes contained by steel and concrete, and the assumption that engineering could master chemistry. The town of Whiting grew around the refinery like a settlement around a fortress. Workers needed housing, families needed schools, churches, stores. By the 1930s, 7,000 people worked at the plant. Tens of thousands lived within a mile of its boundaries. They depended on Standard Oil for wages, for the local economy, for survival. The relationship was symbiotic and unequal. The company provided. The community accepted the risks. If you want to work, you live with the danger. If you want to feed your family, you don't ask too many questions about what happens when pressure vessels fail or storage tanks overflow or gas clouds drift through neighborhoods at night. By 1955, the refinery had already experienced explosions, fires, and chemical releases. In July 1921, 8 workers died when gasoline pressure stills exploded. In September 1941, a 9-hour fire destroyed 30 storage tanks and killed 1 man. These incidents were noted, investigated briefly, and then forgotten as the machinery started up again and production resumed. The company paid damages. The families buried their dead. The refinery kept running. This is what subscribe to this channel to see more stories like this. Stories of industrial power, community vulnerability, and the hidden costs of America's energy infrastructure. The hydroformer that explodes on August 27, 1955, is a vessel designed to produce high-octane gasoline. Inside the tower, naphtha, a volatile petroleum distillate, is mixed with hydrogen gas under extreme pressure and temperature in the presence of a catalyst. The chemical reaction rearranges hydrocarbon molecules, creating fuel that burns cleaner and more powerfully in automobile engines. This is sophisticated chemistry. It requires precision. The process operates at temperatures exceeding 900 degrees Fahrenheit and pressures that could crush a human body instantly. The steel walls of the hydroformer are inches thick, reinforced with concrete at the base. The tower is equipped with safety valves, pressure gauges, and emergency shutdown systems. It has been inspected. It has been certified. It is one of the largest pieces of refining equipment ever constructed. The danger lies not in what is visible, but in what cannot be seen. The microscopic stresses in welds, the fatigue in metal subjected to thermal expansion and contraction, the possibility that a single weak point in a structure this massive could propagate a catastrophic failure. Refinery work is an environment of invisible threats. Workers breathe air laced with benzene, hydrogen sulfide, and hydrocarbon vapors. They walk past tanks containing substances that can ignite from static electricity. They operate equipment where a single spark, a single leak, a single overpressure event can trigger explosions measured in city blocks. The men who work at Whiting understand this. They see the burn scars on older workers. They attend the funerals. But they also see the paychecks, the pensions, the promise of stability in an industrial economy where alternatives are scarce. Standard Oil of Indiana is one of the largest employers in the region. To refuse the work is to leave the area. So they go to work. They trust the engineering. They trust the inspections. They trust that someone, somewhere, has calculated the risks and deemed them acceptable. The history of refining is a history of disasters deferred and lessons ignored. The same year the Whiting hydroformer is installed, refineries across America experience fires, explosions, and toxic releases. In 1947, a ship loaded with ammonium nitrate exploded in Texas City, triggering a refinery fire that killed 581 people, the deadliest industrial disaster in U.S. history. Investigations revealed inadequate safety protocols, insufficient training, and a culture that prioritized production over protection. Recommendations were issued. Some were implemented. Most were not. The economic logic was clear. Safety measures cost money, on slow production, and reduce profits. Companies calculated that occasional disasters were cheaper than systemic change. They paid settlements to families. They rebuilt damaged units. They resumed operations. In 1950, a fire at a Gulf oil refinery in Philadelphia injured dozens. In 1952, an explosion at a Shell refinery in California killed 3 workers. In 1954, a Standard Oil refinery in New Jersey experienced a major fire. Each incident followed a pattern: mechanical failure or human error, inadequate emergency response, insufficient containment systems, flames spreading faster than firefighters could control them. Each investigation concluded with similar findings. Equipment maintenance was deferred, inspections were superficial, workers were inadequately trained, emergency systems failed under actual conditions, and each time, production resumed before the ashes cooled. The Whiting Refinery had its own history of close calls. In the years before 1955, workers reported hot spots in processing units, pressure fluctuations in pipelines, and valves that didn't seal properly. Some filed anonymous complaints with management. Some were told the issues would be addressed during scheduled maintenance. Some were told to keep working. The refinery operated continuously, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Shutting down a unit for repairs meant lost production. Lost production meant lost profits. So the units kept running, and the workers kept hoping that the next shift wouldn't be the one when something failed catastrophically. Have you worked in an environment where danger was accepted as normal? Leave a comment below and share your experience. The families living in the shadow of the refinery understood their position in an unspoken bargain. Standard Oil provided employment that sustained the local economy. Without the refinery, Whiting would be another forgotten Indiana town, its population scattered, its businesses closed. The company knew this. The workers knew this. The families knew this. So they stayed. They raised children in homes where the air sometimes smelled of sulfur and gasoline. They learned to ignore the flares that burned through the night, the occasional rumble of a controlled burn, the chemical tang that settled over the neighborhood when the wind shifted. They told themselves that the company had engineers, that the refinery had been operating for decades, that disasters happened elsewhere but not here. This is the psychology of proximity to danger, the normalization of risk, the erosion of alarm, the belief that today will be like yesterday. Children played in yards a quarter-mile from storage tanks containing millions of gallons of flammable liquids. Families slept in homes within range of debris if a major vessel failed. They had no evacuation plans because no one believed evacuation would be necessary. The company did not require them. The town did not demand them. The workers did not insist on them. Everyone was complicit in the fiction that nothing truly catastrophic would occur. The economic dependence created silence. To question the refinery's safety was to question the source of the community's livelihood. To demand better protections was to risk being labeled difficult, to endanger employment, to threaten the stability of an entire region. So the questions went unasked. The refinery expanded, the population grew, the distance between homes and hazards shrank. By August 1955, thousands of people lived and worked within the blast radius of the Whiting Refinery's most dangerous equipment. On the morning of August 27th, the brand-new hydroformer is in its startup phase, brought online after months of construction and testing. Inside the tower, naphtha and hydrogen are heated to operating temperature. Pressure builds. The catalytic reaction begins. At 6:12 a.m., something fails. The exact cause will be debated for months. A weld failure, a pressure spike, a design flaw, an operator error. What is not debatable is what happens next. The hydroformer explodes with a force that registers on seismographs. The explosion tears the vessel apart from the inside, fracturing steel plate designed to contain forces far beyond normal operating conditions. Chunks of metal weighing tons are hurled hundreds of feet through the air. Some crash into other processing units, rupturing pipelines and igniting secondary fires. Some crash into storage tanks, puncturing walls and releasing pressurized contents. Some travel beyond the refinery boundaries, slamming into homes, businesses, and vehicles in residential areas. The sound is described by survivors as apocalyptic. One woman says it felt like the sun exploded and this was the end of the world. A resident watching from a distance says the explosion created a big red flash, followed by a noise that shook buildings miles away. Windows shatter in a 3-mile radius. Glass becomes shrapnel, injuring people in their homes. The initial fireball rises hundreds of feet, igniting anything flammable in its radius. Burning debris rains down across 45 acres. 60 million barrels of petroleum products in storage tanks catch fire. The flames spread from tank to tank, each explosion triggering the next in a cascade of destruction. Within minutes, the refinery is an inferno. Black smoke billows thousands of feet into the sky, visible from Chicago, from Gary, from 30 miles in every direction. The mushroom cloud darkens whiting, casting the town in shadow at sunrise. In the residential neighborhood adjacent to the refinery, families scramble through homes that are collapsing around them. Harvey Hunter finds his son Dennis trapped under a bed, covered in broken glass and plaster. He finds his wife Beverly and daughter Bonnie in the wreckage of their bedroom. A 180-ton piece of steel, larger than most houses, has crashed through the grocery store 2 blocks away. The building is flattened. The owner, who left minutes before the explosion, returns to find nothing but rubble and twisted metal. In a home on White Oak Avenue, 3-year-old Ricky Pluniak is killed instantly when a 10-foot steel pipe crashes through the roof and into his bedroom. His family, sleeping in adjacent rooms, survives. They will live with the knowledge that their survival was a matter of fate, that death arrived randomly and without warning, that the company they depended on for their livelihood had built machinery that could kill their children while they slept. The destruction does not end with the initial explosion. Burning oil from ruptured tanks flows across the refinery grounds, creating rivers of fire that ignite everything in their path. The oil spills into streets, into sewers, into the Indiana Harbor Ship Canal. Residents are warned not to smoke, not to light stoves, not to use anything that might create a spark, because gasoline vapors are backing up through sewer lines into basements and homes. Some utility poles catch fire. Some vehicles parked near the refinery are consumed by flames. Some homes are moved off their foundations by the force of the explosion or by the impact of debris traveling at ballistic speed. Firefighters from Whiting, Hammond, East Chicago, Gary, Calumet City, Dolton, and Chicago arrive to find an inferno beyond their capacity to extinguish. More than 6,000 firefighters and refinery workers battle the flames over the next 8 days. They quickly realize that their goal is not to extinguish the fire, but to contain it, to prevent it from spreading to other parts of the refinery, to keep it from reaching the Sinclair oil refinery a mile away, to stop it from consuming even more of the town. They build sand barricades, trucking in loads from the Indiana dunes to create barriers that might slow the flow of burning oil. The heat is so intense that metal structures melt, that railroad rails bend like spaghetti, that freight cars are reduced to puddles of liquefied steel. Workers describe standing hundreds of feet from the flames and feeling as though their skin is burning. Some collapse from heat exhaustion. Some suffer burns even through protective gear. Throughout the next week, storage tanks continue to explode as the fire reaches them. Each explosion sends shockwaves through the ground, through the air, through homes where families are huddled, waiting to learn if they will be evacuated, if their homes will survive, if the fire will spread to their street. 1,500 residents are evacuated from 600 homes. Armed National Guard units patrol the streets to maintain order, to prevent looting, to assist those who need help leaving. Some families flee with nothing but the clothes they are wearing. Some return days later to find their homes destroyed, their possessions incinerated, their neighborhood transformed into a disaster zone. The final count, when it comes, will be described as miraculous, given the scale of destruction. 2 people are dead. 3-year-old Ricky Pluniak, killed by flying debris in his home, and Walter Rhea, a 61-year-old Standard Oil foreman who suffers a fatal heart attack while responding to the initial explosion. 40 people are injured, some severely, suffering burns, broken bones, lacerations, and trauma that will take years to heal. 1,500 people are displaced from their homes, their lives upended, their sense of security shattered. The fire burns for 8 days and 5 hours. When the last flames are finally extinguished on September 4th, 1955, the damage is tallied: 45 acres of the refinery destroyed, 70 storage tanks crumbled and burned out, 3 processing units obliterated, twisted and blackened, steel scattered across the grounds like the remains of a battlefield. The economic loss is estimated at $30 million, equivalent to nearly $300 million today, most of it covered by insurance. The memorial for Ricky Pluniak is held in a town still smoldering. His parents bury their 3-year-old son and return to a neighborhood where homes are damaged beyond repair, where the air still smells of burned petroleum, where every window offers a view of the refinery that killed their child. Walter Rhea's family receives condolences from Standard Oil management and a company pension. His death is listed as a heart attack, not as a direct casualty of the explosion, a bureaucratic distinction that will affect his family's compensation and his place in the official count of victims. The injured are treated in hospitals overwhelmed by burn cases, fractures, and respiratory damage from inhaling smoke and chemical fumes. Some will recover fully. Others will carry scars, physical and psychological, for the rest of their lives. And the community of Whiting is left with a question it cannot answer. How do you live in the shadow of something that can kill you in your sleep? The investigation into the Whiting disaster reveals what investigations always reveal: a cascade of failures, systemic weaknesses, and a culture that deferred safety in favor of production. The hydroformer was new, designed to handle extreme pressures and temperatures, but its construction and startup procedures were rushed to meet production deadlines. Welds were not adequately inspected. Pressure tests were conducted under conditions that did not fully replicate operational stress. Workers were not fully trained on emergency shutdown procedures for equipment this complex. Emergency response plans assumed small fires, not catastrophic failures. The refinery's fire suppression systems were overwhelmed within minutes. The company's internal investigation concludes that the explosion resulted from a pressure spike in the hydroformer, possibly caused by a weld failure or a control system malfunction. The exact cause is never definitively determined. Standard Oil releases a statement expressing regret for the loss of life and pledging to rebuild the damaged sections of the refinery with improved safety measures. The company offers to purchase homes in the most heavily damaged areas, buying out families who no longer feel safe living adjacent to the plant. Some families take the offer and leave. Others, economically bound to the refinery, stay. Government investigators from Indiana and federal agencies conduct their own reviews. They issue reports noting inadequate maintenance, insufficient safety protocols, and a pattern of prioritizing production over worker and community safety. They make recommendations: more rigorous inspections, better training, improved emergency response systems, greater separation between industrial hazards and residential areas. Some recommendations are implemented, many are not. The economic logic remains unchanged. Comprehensive safety measures cost money, reduce efficiency, and cut into profits. Companies calculate the costs of disasters, settlements, rebuilding, public relations, and compare them to the costs of prevention. Disaster is often cheaper. By 1956, Standard Oil has rebuilt the destroyed sections of the Whiting Refinery and resumed full production. The hydroformer is replaced with a new unit built to revised specifications. Life returns to normal in Whiting, though the town's population begins a slow decline. Some families leave, unwilling to remain in the shadow of the refinery. Others stay, bound by economics, by employment, by the stubborn belief that lightning does not strike twice. What happened in this town? Leave a comment with your thoughts on industrial accountability. The Whiting disaster is not an isolated incident, but part of a pattern that defines the refining industry throughout the 20th century. The economic incentives are clear. Oil companies profit from production, not from prevention. Safety measures reduce margins. Maintenance costs money. Shutdowns interrupt cash flow. Companies operate refineries at maximum capacity with minimum oversight, betting that the costs of occasional disasters will be lower than the costs of comprehensive safety systems. When explosions occur, when fires rage, when workers die, the companies pay settlements, rebuild facilities, and resume operations. Lawsuits are settled quietly. Investigations fade from public memory. Regulations are proposed, lobbied against, weakened, and eventually forgotten. The cycle repeats. In the decades after 1955, the Whiting Refinery experiences additional fires, explosions, chemical releases, and environmental contamination. In 1957, 2 workers are killed in a refinery fire. In 1978, explosions force evacuations. In 1979, fumes described as 85% explosive drive families from their homes. In 1988, 3 workers are killed in an asphalt plant explosion. In 1990, 2 workers die in a loading dock blast. By the late 1980s, Indiana officials declare the Whiting Refinery the most dangerous workplace in the state. OSHA fines the company hundreds of thousands of dollars for safety violations. State inspectors order shutdowns of equipment deemed to pose imminent danger. And still the refinery operates, still the community depends on it, still the workers return each day to an environment where death is one spark, one leak, one pressure spike away. The economic dependence creates a kind of paralysis. Workers cannot afford to quit. Communities cannot afford to demand shutdowns. Regulators cannot afford to impose penalties severe enough to force systemic change. The refinery is too important to the local economy, too integrated into the energy infrastructure, too powerful to challenge effectively. So the pattern continues. What the Whiting disaster leaves behind is not just physical destruction, but a legacy of trauma and compromise. The families who lost loved ones carry grief that no settlement can address. The workers who survived carry knowledge that their employer's machinery can kill randomly, that safety protocols fail, that economic dependence creates vulnerability. The community carries the memory of the day the sky turned black, the day fire rained from above, the day a 3-year-old boy died in his bed because a corporation built a bomb next to a neighborhood. After 1955, Standard Oil purchases land adjacent to the refinery, demolishing homes and creating a buffer zone between industrial operations and residential areas. But this is progress of a kind, acknowledging, finally, that refineries and bedrooms should not coexist. But the buffer is narrow, the separation incomplete. Families still live within the blast radius. Children still grow up breathing air laced with petrochemicals. Workers still enter facilities where one failure can kill dozens. The company, which becomes Amoco in the 1970s and is acquired by BP in 1998, continues to operate the Whiting Refinery. It remains one of the largest in the United States, processing hundreds of thousands of barrels of crude oil each day, employing thousands, sustaining the local economy. It also continues to experience incidents, spills, leaks, fires, and violations of environmental and safety regulations. In 2009, the EPA cites BP for emitting cancer-causing benzene at the refinery for 6 years without proper controls. In 2013, BP invests billions to modernize the facility, claiming improvements in safety and environmental performance. But the fundamental relationship remains unchanged. A community economically dependent on an industry that poses existential risks, a company that prioritizes profit over protection, and a regulatory system too weak to force transformation. The Whiting disaster teaches a lesson that America refuses to learn, that industrial power and community safety are often incompatible, that economic dependence creates vulnerability, that corporations exploit, that disasters are not accidents, but the predictable outcomes of systems designed to value production over people. The lesson is written in the scars of burn victims, in the graves of those killed, in the memories of those who survived. On this channel, we document these stories not to dwell on the past, but to illuminate the present. The forces that created the Whiting disaster, corporate prioritization of profit, regulatory weakness, community dependence, and normalized risk, remain active in industries across America. Refineries still explode, chemical plants still leak, workers still die in preventable incidents, and communities still struggle with the impossible choice between economic survival and physical safety. The memory of August 27, 1955, endures in Whiting, Indiana, as a reminder of what can happen when engineering fails, when safety is deferred, when communities are forced to live in the shadow of industrial hazards. The 1955 Whiting refinery disaster killed 2 people, injured 40, destroyed 45 acres, and displaced 1,500. It burned for 8 days. It cost $30 million, and it changed nothing. The refinery rebuilt. Production resumed. The cycle continued. If there is a lesson, it is this: disasters are not failures of technology, but failures of priorities. We know how to build safe refineries. We know how to protect workers and communities. We choose not to, because safety costs money and money shapes decisions. Until that changes, the pattern will repeat. Fires will burn, explosions will shatter windows, children will die in their beds, and we will call it an accident when it was always a choice. Subscribe and leave your thoughts below as we continue documenting the hidden costs of American industry.